Well, I am really glad they're going to be doing something with it and not just, tearing it down.
I hated to see that building just going down, and I figured what they'll do is they'll tear it down and make a gas station or something.
Everybody from Knight's Landing and Esparto and Dunnigan and even Davis would come over to Woodland because of the wonderful movie theaters that were along Main Street there.
I know a lot of people that can't wait to go to that first show. They're not worried about parking or what might happen. They're just glad to have a nice place to come back to the core of their community.
Very little can be accomplished really in a community just by one person trying to make it happen. It takes leadership, of course, but it takes many people who get involved, and that's happened with the State Theater. All kinds of people have had to be involved for this to come about. And isn't it a wonderful thing that it is? We all should celebrate.
This is probably a project more than 10 plus years in the making. It's a great public-private partnership. Mr. Corkle, the theater developer, has purchased the State Theater from the city and is in the process, as you can see, of doing the addition and renovating the State Theater. The city, in recognition of the investment for the State Theater, took a look at the street fabric that was adjacent to the theater project and decided it was worth the investment to put in almost $2 million to create a street that was worthy of the new theater project.
For me, I always get bogged down dealing with a blank canvas. With restoration projects, it's more of a treasure hunt, and you have something that you can bring back to life and restore it, and it's so much better than working with a blank canvas and going, okay, now what do I do? With here, you have your set of parameters, you have a goal in mind, and like I said, it's a blast to be able to dig deeper and find different things like we've had happen here, where of course all the photos are in black and white and you don't know what the colors are. Then when you're doing the demolition and finding and uncovering things and seeing some of the things that didn't get painted over, to give you that insight of and keys of, okay, that's the color palette. This is where we need to go with. So it's just a blast to do. Well, we're using the historic photos from books like yours and Hollingshead photos that are just, for me, is my Bible. I've got them, I bring them up on my big screen on my desk and blow them up and looking at all the different things, and it's like a whole discovery of a treasure trove. And that helps to guide me. And like I said, when we start peeling things away and finding different color palettes and then going and researching the historical colors and what was commonly used in this era, going down the street to the old hotel who was built in the same period and very fortunately didn't cover up those colors, and taking photos of that and matching them up to the historic palettes that are available today. These are sections from the chandeliers, because a lot of the chandeliers have a lot of damage and broken parts. So basically there's 3 shapes that make up that chandelier. So these are one of each that I'm going to take and get reproduced so I can repair all those chandeliers. We're taking down and saving all of the old exit signs so we can use those instead of using modern ones. They're all going to have to be rewired. A lot of the ceiling details and architectural details are being saved, and the sconces. All the sconces are going to be rewired and put back up again, and different railings. So this is my treasure trove up here. I've got a lot of the old letters that we're still storing and keeping. We had to separate and categorize. But you never know what you might need and what you can bring back to life. Where you can see we're in the process of bringing the ceiling back to life. Thank God they only painted it once, because the old design bled through, and then as we took down the chandeliers, we were able to discover some of the original paint colors to give us our motivation to figure out how to convert these black and white photos we've been studying forever into true living color. And we're recreating it exactly as they did. So you can see what they painted over. This was the bottom side of the chandelier mounts. They painted over, and they had stars on here which were applique stars. They weren't painted on stars, and they scraped them off and then painted over. But you can see the stripe here, and then the scalloped, reverse scallop detail in the middle. The original screen was actually very small by today's standards. By the standards back then, it was pretty grand. And then when they did the renovation in the 60s, they went about, I'd say, 4 feet wider on either side. And now our screen that we're going to put in here will be, I think it's around 55 to 60 feet wide. And it'll be more on a curved, so it'll be a very ominous screen.
I think it'll be the biggest one in this region.
It will be. It will be, and we're also going to be doing Atmos sound, Dolby Atmos sound, which is the complete surround sound, which is the #1 technology out there, that if there's a helicopter flying over your head, you literally hear it passing you, going from right to left over your head.
Do you want to talk about the seating, how it was and how it will be?
Well, it was done like in two tiers, 2 slants, with the original projector booth being way up top, as you can see in the back. Now we're gonna, and because that shape was dictated by the size of seating and allowable space for the seating that they did back then, which, if you remember, you were pretty tight in there. Now we're lengthening each level to give you more leg room, and we're gonna add seating that's a lot more plush and reclinable. So that means that all that has to extend out, and the grade will be a completely different grade.
We're only a few moments away from the relocation of 2 historic palm trees from our community, located by the old Southern Pacific Railroad station. They're coming down Main Street shortly, and they're going to go in 2 vaults here, flanking a new mid-block crosswalk in our downtown. Woodland has been on the path for rehabilitation of its historic structures for many years now, and we're starting to see the fruits of all that effort.
Yeah, palm trees have been part of the woodland landscape actually for a long time, well over 100 years. It was in 1905 that to promote Arbor Day, the packets of palm seeds were given out to anybody, encouraging people to plant palm trees. And if you look around Woodland, particularly in the old part of town, you'll see a fair number of palm trees, particularly in the front yards of Victorian houses.
Yeah, so palm trees, I think, have a long history here in Woodland, and so when we had the opportunity to revision the street after the theater project had been approved, my natural instinct was to see how we could integrate palm trees into the streetscape scene. And I was a little surprised with some of the negative reaction to it.
We're not Southern California. We should have almond trees or oak trees, the beautiful valley oaks.
You know, the original idea was to use the palm trees not just because of the heritage here, but also to balance the entryway over on the east side by the railroad tracks, where we have 6 Canary Island pines framing the entry from the east side.
And then I drove down Main Street, and son of a gun, the state theater put in palm trees.
People have strong opinions on palm trees, and I've been among them. I remember when we did the original streetscape in downtown Woodland in the late 80s, and palm trees were actually recommended in that scheme, and people came out of the woodwork to oppose it. You know, rats live in palm trees. I heard all sorts of things.
One of the most prominent places in Woodland, of course, for palm trees is the library. It was in 1905, shortly after the library was built, that the mayor at the time, Richard Beamer, purchased and planted those beautiful California fan palms around Court and First Street, and then the beautiful Canary Island palms that greet you as you walk up to the library. And they beautifully complemented the mission-style architecture of the library. To me, it just says California.
Woodland has changed too much. And it's none of my business, but I didn't understand the 2 palm trees, why they had to be out in front.
The palm tree is a beautiful tree, and while it may not be a California native, it's certainly become a prominent California presence, and including in Woodland. And the 2 trees that are there in front of that beautiful new theater emerging have been in our community for over 100 years, not very far away, just a few blocks, and they were given to us by the Union Pacific Railroad just for the cost of transporting them from their site to the new site. And you know, people love those trees now that they see them, and when you approach downtown Woodland from the west, those trees stand out majestic, and they tell you you're coming up to something big. And that beautiful new theater complex with neon and all the glamour of the blade signage and the new bulbed out feature, it's just going to be such a welcoming and exciting presence.
It's now the gateway. As you enter from the west into downtown Woodland, you know, here's the theater. It's going to be shiny, you know, the beautiful marquee tower, these big palm trees. It'll be an interesting mix. It's one that has worked in other places. I think that it's fine. I mean, I think that, you know, if whatever trees we plant in front of the theater are going to look good, and palm trees are a really classic example of what Mr. Lee used to use in all of his projects in Southern California, and very successful ones.
Yeah, over 20 theaters have come and gone downtown over the last century, beginning in 1908 with the first motion picture showed at the Opera House. And after that, a lot of small theaters opened downtown. They called them Nickelodeons. Some people will remember the National Theater in the 30s, the golden age of cinema, when we had 3 or 4 downtown. People could literally almost go to a different movie every evening. The National, that burned. The Legion Theater was a temporary theater on Bush Street that the Redwood Theater Group opened. The Yolo Theater was built. You had Bill's Theater on 2nd Street, right behind the Opera House for many years. The Porter Theater, also operated by the Redwood Theater Group, was a converted post office on College Street. But it was in 1937 that the State Theater opened, which was Woodland's most substantial theater, and that was professionally designed by top-notch architects and in an Art Deco style. And that was actually Woodland's first theater built from the ground up. In other words, it wasn't a remodeled building. So yeah, the State Theater was really the theater in Woodland's history. The State Theater was developed in 1937 by Redwood Theater Groups, headed by George Mann. Mr. Mann was very active at the time developing theaters along the Redwood Highway up in Humboldt County, places like
Fortuna, Eureka, Arcata. He and his partner at the time, Morgan Walsh, developed the State Theater. And then his son Richard, after he finished his Navy duty and graduated from Stanford University, took over the family business.
This is my father, George M. Mann. He looked like Franklin Delano Roosevelt to a certain extent, although he was a Republican, not a Democrat. But actually used to take pictures of him with a hat with the brim up, cigarette holder, and these glasses. And then the picture was titled, "My Friends," which is what Roosevelt always used to say. Well, it was called Redwood Theaters because it went up the Redwood Highway. Particularly Eureka was, the theater business used to have what you called key locations. And that was really a term that the film companies came up with. They were your more important locations. And we had three keys. It was Eureka, and we had Modesto down in the valley, and we had Klamath Falls, Oregon. Those were our three key situations. And then the next two more important, you might say like sub-keys, were Ukiah and Woodland.
Yeah, the architect for the State Theater, William B. David, highly skilled, designed a beautiful, modern, kind of cutting-edge, streamlined, modern Art Deco design. He trained with S. Charles Lee, who was very well known. There's been books written about S. Charles Lee, who designed many beautiful movie palaces in Southern California. So these gentlemen brought a real slice of sophistication to small-town Woodland.
S. Charles Lee was an outstanding theater architect based in Los Angeles. I'm under the belief that Bill was like his representative in Northern California. And in the case of a number of our theaters, seemingly S. Charles Lee's name were on early versions of the plans, and then Bill's name on the later versions. Like Bill was the architect for the Eureka Theater. He was the architect for the Woodland Theaters. But on the early plans, maybe it said S. Charles Lee. But Bill later became my father's general manager, and he got into the theater business also, Bill did. And later on he produced, I think, a series of 12 pictures or something.
William B. David, who designed the State Theater, was very active in the region. For example, he designed the Tower Theater in Sacramento along with the Esquire Theater on K Street, which today is the IMAX Theater, and he also designed the Davis Varsity Theater.
Interestingly, I know Bill had worked for William Randolph Hearst, designing set decorations and things like that. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted to design buildings. So he quit Hearst. And Hearst told him he'd never work again in the motion picture industry. Hearst had tremendous power. And years later, I guess Bill was in our office and he got a call from Hearst from Wintoon, which is, I think, in Northern California somewhere. He wanted to have a film from perhaps Woodland go over to him so he could look at it. And so I guess they had a laugh with each other. I first went to work for my father's company in 1946, and I worked in Modesto. And I did a little bit of everything there. I remember I loved working in the projection room, and I was, I guess, mainly a doorman, janitor, whatever. And then in 1947, they sent me to Woodland. And as I recall, it was to manage the Porter Theater. It was a little tiny theater, so it was a good place to start. Well, the State Theater was a very good theater. It was a beautiful theater. Remember, if you go back into your history, I think the Porter had been the post office. And when my dad and Morgan Walsh came to town. They got the Porter, and that was an easy conversion. They got that open right away. And I think the local theater maybe had burned down or something. So they came in, the Porter Theater was a quick job, and it was meant to hold over the year or so while the big State Theater was being built.
My sister worked at the State Theater. She worked in the concession counter, and then she was a cashier, and then she got me a job there. And I was an usherette. And in those days, you did wear uniforms. The ones that we wore were maroon and gold.
The uniforms were just wonderful. They looked like band uniforms. You had the brass buttons down the front and the stripe on the leg.
Just walk around all the time. You have to walk down, and you go upstairs, you'd have to walk up there to make sure people didn't have their feet on the seat. If they had their feet on the seat, you had to shine your flashlight on them. And if they didn't behave after a certain amount of time, you had to make them leave.
A bunch of the high school boys always tried to sneak in.
But these guys, you had to buy a loge ticket if you wanted to sit upstairs. Otherwise, you sat downstairs. And they never paid for a loge ticket, but they always managed to sit upstairs. And nobody ever seemed to catch them at it either.
No? Oh, yeah, we got caught. Sure, we got caught.
Because they didn't leave when you told them. Because I was a young girl, a lot of the guys just laughed at you. And you got to see the movie free. I mean, you were supposed to keep moving, but if the show got an interesting part, you weren't going to move too much. You were going to sit there and look at it. And then when the managers, like I said before, when they left, you could drink all the soda you wanted or eat all the popcorn you wanted. Just keep an eye out so they don't catch you.
We were just sitting there watching the movie, and it was dark in the theater. And all of a sudden, he just reached over and put this little box in my hand. And I thought, what is this, And he didn't even really say open it or anything. He just, So I opened it, and it was so dark in the theater, I really couldn't see. I had to wait till the screen got some light on it so I could see what it was. But I knew it was a ring box. And that's how I got my ring.
And I think the reason I probably gave it to her in there was because it was so small. I didn't want her to see how cheap I was.
I remember again where I was sitting and who I was with when I saw the Glenn Miller story. And it was this beautiful, wonderful story. And I guess since it had happened, before we were born or tiny, maybe we didn't know how it was going to end. So we weren't prepared for the fact that he died young in the plane crash. And that was the first time I cried in a movie. I think I cried out loud. That was really embarrassing, except that everybody else was doing the same thing. So,
for me, the State Theater was my citadel, my university, my school of where I learned about Broadway musicals, movie musicals, Fred Astaire and Judy Garland and Gene Kelly, and my big heartthrob was Doris Day, the girl next door. But the singing and the dancing and the color and the production, I know was a springboard for me to get into and maintain a career in the music business. It was a learning experience, a teaching experience, educational experience. It just filled my heart with, I say very often that the lifeblood of my creative soul is music. And where else would you get this except at a major theater showing the major productions? And where was that? That was the State Theater.
In 1966, City Manager John Ferns summoned Woodland property owners along Main Street over to City Hall to tell them that Caltrans had decided to widen Main Street by 4 feet, which at the time was a state highway. In the doing of that, they insisted that any signs close to Main Street be taken down because they would encroach on the highway and were considered advertising. So tragically, that's why the State Theater's beautiful marquee and neon tower were taken down.
And yes, I was around when the state highway commissioner, whoever it was, said, "Oh, you got to tear off that front end." It was like cutting off someone's arm or taking the life's blood away from them.
I was devastated when I had to take that tower down because that was such a beautiful building.
Because they took the kiosk out and put it inside where you had to go buy your ticket inside. And then they also chopped off the front of the State Theater, and it just didn't look took away the glamour, whatever it was about the state that made it special, just to have it like a flat front.
I had a partner in Los Angeles who had done a beautiful job placing a huge sign back against the front of the theaters that he had there. I think he had a twin, and he put that big flat sign up. I said, well, gee, that's what I'll do in Woodland. So I was trying to do what had been successful elsewhere, but of course it wasn't as beautiful as what we had to take down. Years later, the city wanted it put back up, but you know, it would cost a fortune to do that today. Maybe Dave's going to spend that fortune to do it somehow.
So to see it come back and to see it's going to be the shining star of Main Street and Woodland and Yolo County. There'll be nothing like it.
The State Theater operated 73 years, several generations from 1937, didn't close till 2010, and the multiplex out at the mall, Cinemark, opened in 1990, so the State Theater operated for 20 years, even after the modern multiplex came to Woodland, so it had a very long run.
What we did was, when you say, how did we survive the multiplexes, we multiplexed ourselves. I used to have 2 stores in that building, and we had pretty good tenants. One was a coffee shop, and that was a good rental for years, and then there was a lady who had a wonderful children's store, and that was I think maybe it was called the Stork Shop. We were seeing the industry multiplexing. I said, well, gee, why can't I turn a theater out of that?
They just were kind of low cost theaters, I guess. And then the state just started kind of going down. It wasn't as well kept. They painted over the nice designs they had on the ceiling, and it just started looking a little worn. The seats weren't kept up.
So we then had one very large theater and the 2 little ones, and they didn't do too badly. And with the 3 theaters under one overhead, it really helped the theater to stay competitive for a long time.
Well, you can see these old sconces that used to be in the theater that they ripped out in the 60s and disposed of. And they covered up the holes, and we found the holes and were able to run wire through those conduit again. And with the old-time photos, had some local guy, metal worker, recreate the sconces. The parts that are missing is the plexiglass panels that go in there.
Right.
With the blue and the gold and the white. And then they'll be powered and illuminated with LED lighting staying very energy efficient, and all the chandeliers are out and we had them completely dismantled, taken apart, and each piece cleaned, polished, and repainted. The acoustic panels are already up, and we used the same burgundy felt to match the old look of the old theater. So you can see they're done with the fabric panels, but using that same burgundy color. But we've got them covered up just to keep them from getting dusty, so we don't have to go and vacuum the panels when we're done. But when you see this room with those acoustic panels, it's just breathtaking. It really is. It ties it all together. But that's the original design. And if you see the couple up above the stage, from waist up was painted over and disappeared. But waist down was behind the screen that they built in the 60s. So we were able to, again, by getting rid of that 1960s platform and screen framing, we were able to find those colors.
So yeah, in 2009, I, along with 4 other people, were appointed by the City Council to the Citizens Redevelopment Advisory Committee, was really to make recommendations to the City Council on high priority uses of redevelopment dollars.
The redevelopment committee looked at many different objectives for downtown.
It was really at that committee level in 2009 that we strongly encouraged the City Council to consider rehabbing the State Theater, which was on the verge of closing.
It was a good group, and we had a lot of great, strong ideas. And Ron Caceres kind of came into the picture toward the end of all that. And we were excited that we had a local developer who had his business and future vested in the community of Woodland. And we were kind of taking our town back and letting outside developers know we had our own vision and wanted to do our own thing.
That really became the catalyst for serious dialogue in the community to not ignore the State Theater, and it ended up pitting the State Theater with kind of a long-standing idea to build a new cinema downtown. And then that in turn coalesced into the Friends of the State Theater that formed around a movement to save and preserve the State Theater.
Well, I got interested in the State Theater in about 2010. The city had expressed an interest for a long time of wanting to have a downtown multiplex. And I knew that there was an RFP coming up for the State Theater. They wanted to, or not for the State Theater, but for a downtown multiplex. And I knew that there was other proposals on the table. And so I thought a natural place to have a multiplex would be at the existing State Theater complex. We had land around there that we could expand the State Theater with. And so I just thought it was a natural to have it there rather than some other location.
I really was impressed with the interest. You could go to city council meetings and important things would be happening and there wouldn't be the representation from the town there. As these meetings went on, we had people that had moved away from the area and come back, and they wanted to see that State Theater redone in the way that Ron Caceres wanted it done. And I'm Kim Morris, and I was asked to sit on the redevelopment board about this time last year. And I really had hoped that you all would really listen to the outcome of all those meetings, which was a general consensus of 5 members that we preserve some of our downtown personality and our heritage and keep this project at the state. So I went up and down Main Street and I got names of property owners and their businesses and their signatures. And without any hesitation, their signatures would go on this petition to keep the state where it is. I want them to come to downtown. I want to see it revitalized. If you put some balance back into this downtown, I think it'll go far beyond what you're thinking right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think that when you look at how many people in this community have grown up here and lived here, and for whom the State Theater has been a symbol of something to them, the fact that there was a lot of support really didn't surprise me. I think it just showed me that there was an interest, both from a historical standpoint and an interest from an emotional standpoint from people generally. So I don't think I was surprised.
We have the overwhelming support of the community, and you have seen the support in previous meetings and in the emails you are undoubtedly receiving from our supporters. The State Theater is a major asset to our downtown, and we have the plan to save it for generations to come. We can revitalize the downtown with this project as a catalyst. Please do the right thing and set the precedent that the historic city of Woodland is fair in their business dealings and plays by the rules. By having a reputation of being business friendly, our community and citizens will benefit greatly. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, it was disappointing, not having the council vote for our project. They voted actually for another project and to suspend the RFP altogether. I think I stayed positive just because of the amount of community support that was behind the State Theater. And I knew after that, having all these community members behind me, that I wanted to continue on and do something to save the building. Because, like I said, it was a historic Art Deco building, one of the few that we've got in town. And it just seemed like people wanted that structure to be saved.
Lots of twists and turns with the story to save the State Theater. Ironically, Cinema West and Dave Corkle, a really accomplished theater operator in Northern California, had plans to purchase and rehab the State Theater going all the way back to 2004. But that proposal was stymied due to concerns about parking. Other concerns I think that the city put up, because by then there was already discussions going on at City Hall to build a new cinema on the other side of downtown over by 3rd Street or 5th Street. A lot of different proposals came and went during that period.
Well, the downtown specific plan had identified a location at 3rd and Main Street as being where the multiplex in town should be located. At the time, Paul Petrovich had just come along as a developer that brought a lot of new energy and options to Woodland. Woodland's town council members were working actively with him on other projects, and so the energy that was there with his involvement and perhaps our involvement as a theater operator to put a theater at that location, all the pieces seem to be in play.
Yeah, Dave Corkle and I, it's kind of an interesting story. We started out as kind of competitors in this process. He was looking at a different site and different location. I had a different theater operator in mind for the project. And ultimately, his developer won out over myself, although they couldn't deliver the project.
My interest was to build a theater in Woodland that was the best theater for the community and the best location. If that happened to be where the State Theater is, then that was the location I would have gone. If that happened to be at 3rd and Main Street, then that was the location I would have gone.
When I came on the council in 2008, there was an obligation with Paul Petrovich, who developed the great area out at the 102. We're getting a lot of sales tax, and he had this vision. He had purchased the property at 3rd and Main. And one of our previous city managers and the city council had talked to him with the commitment verbally of putting the theater there.
As it ended up, we were moving forward with a project at 3rd and Main Street, and other people were now picking up the project that we had started with at the State Theater, and suddenly the city was faced with two people that wanted to do different projects in different places, and they were both asking for assistance from the city. And here we are with the town council or city council that has to make a decision to favor one over the other.
Yeah, really, when the redevelopment agency had the State Theater proposal from Ron Caceres before it to consider, it was a proposal that I gravitated to for several reasons. I think the primary reason was that it was very obvious that there was a huge amount of community support for that proposal. And whenever the community is very supportive of something, you want to listen and try to see if there is a way for something that meshes both the political powers that be and the community powers that are indicative of a groundswell. If you can mesh those together, you've got a great thing.
Well, it's a long and complicated story, and it has some twists and turns, and it has some pretty deep lows also. This was a hard thing for our community. People filled our council chambers. They were struggling to get that theater restored. They were looking for basically any solution that would maintain the integrity of that theater. So when the council, and this is prior to my joining the council, had decided to go with another project, as you said, at 3rd and Main Street with another developer, there was great disappointment.
So after the city council suspended the RFP and went with the proposal at 3rd and Main, there was discussion about, well, what do we do with the State Theater? Skip Davies formed the State Theater Management Group. There was a serious look at using the State Theater as a second venue for the Opera House, which didn't work out financially. But I think the key was the city purchasing the State Theater from Richard Mann. That was crucial in that the city, the community could control the destiny of the State Theater.
So the other plans for the multiplex fell apart. It was at a different location. The other developer was going to do the project with no subsidy whatsoever. We didn't think that could happen, and ultimately it didn't come to fruition.
Well, unfortunately, the developer that we chose to partner with chose not to proceed. And so, we can all take guesses at why that is, but the financial market in 2010 and 2011 and 2012 was poor. Money was harder to get, and I just think that our partner decided that this wasn't a good business arrangement for him to be involved in.
Well, the key people at City Hall that really helped on this project, I have to give a lot of credit to Ken Hyatt, our Community Development Director, Paul Navazio, the City Manager.
And Ron and I spent maybe 4, 5, 6 months exploring different multi-purpose entertainment venues and came to the conclusion that without significant public investment, it really wasn't going to be a viable business venture, nor was there a natural operator that we could find.
We were thinking that the right fit for a downtown theater in Woodland was a company that not only has experience but prides themselves in doing this type of project in this community.
So we sat in my office, called Dave Corkle one last time to say, hey, we understand that your agreement to develop a theater with Petrovich at 3rd and Main has expired. Would you see any interest in developing the State Theater with an expansion? And Ron had the foresight to acquire an option on the Elm Ford property next door to the State Theater. And so when we presented to Dave Corkle the opportunity to not just renovate the State Theater but expand it onto the adjoining property, Corkle was very interested, and within a matter of 2 months we were before the council with a development agreement to consider selling the property to Cinema West. And so the story goes from there.
It's less about building a theater for the theater's sake, but to build a theater project that can complement a downtown and serve as sort of a catalyst. Dave has done some projects down in the Bay Area and some projects up in the Folsom area. We went and looked at those projects and said, you know what, maybe there's a fit here. And so they had an interest in Woodland. We had an interest in exhausting that opportunity first before we looked at other options, and we did look at other options, and we're just really thankful that the Cinema West partnership came to fruition.
And fortunately for us, Dave Corkle, after working for many years to rehab the State Theater, ironically, he ended up being the person to follow through on it. The city was able to sell the State Theater to Cinema West, so that had a very happy ending.
Dave Corkle is really a great asset to the project and a great operator. He's been doing this for a long time. He's got multiple theater locations. He's been involved in smaller towns as well as big towns, and just knows how to really bring entertainment to a community. And he's certainly done it in other locations. I've been to his theaters, for example, in Tiburon, Folsom, and other locations, and he does a first-rate job. So Dave is a great asset for this.
So for us as a movie theater, the challenge going forward is to make our theaters nicer, to make what we present to the public better than what can be obtained at home, and to look at our competition that's trying to do the same thing and say, we're going to do it better than you.
We have a $9 million project. It's going to take that fabulous 1937 theater, which used to have almost 1,000 seats, make it a 350-seat all Barca Lounger cocktail table venue with the largest screen in Northern California, except for the IMAX theater in Sacramento at 58 feet in width. And what do we get? We get the repainted scenic ceiling, we get those beautiful light fixtures. The walls, which were essentially plain in its original incarnation, will be essentially as they were. But the actual seating area itself is now being reconfigured in a stadium seating, which means that instead of looking through or between heads as we all used to do in these older theaters, we'll now have great views of the screen.
Rob Henry and I have been working together for about the last 9 years on different theater projects that we've built. So we have a relationship with him. And that, coupled with the fact that he had just completed a project in Alameda for the Alameda Theater and Multiplex, which was a similar style of a building with a similar type of addition. It was just a natural. I mean, Rob has the experience to understand historic preservation and the experience to understand new multiplex theaters. And so it was very easy for him to transition his mind from the last project of Alameda to do this one. And as you can see, what we've ended up with is, I think, a really good design, and it maintains much of what the State Theater used to be before it deteriorated. I think it's a great project now.
Yeah, I think the fusion of the proposed design for the State Theater remodel, is brilliant. It integrates not just the historical fabric into the movie experience, but also the contemporary moviegoers' expectations, and even takes it one step further and probably will create, the best movie experience here in Northern California.
The multiplexing, invigorated the business. You don't build a single screen anymore, or a twin, or a triple, or anything. I was building twins and triples a lot of times in my time, maybe fourplexes. But today, the last theater we had an interest in, we had 20 screens. And very high level ones, we had IMAXs and things like that. So that does, invigorate the business, but maybe we'll come up with 3D. I don't know. It's become much more complicated.
I'll be very excited when the State Theater opens. It's been a lot of work with a lot of people. It's been exciting, but a little frustrating at times, but it's the culmination of a lot of hard work from a lot of people, so I'm very excited to see it happen.
So I'm really excited for how downtown Woodland is going to transform over the coming years, and the theater project's just been a natural cornerstone project.
So that's where we are today. I don't know where we're going to be tomorrow, but certainly, you know, the State Theater and Multiplex is going to incorporate all of the amenities that exist today. And as we find new things in the future, whether it be laser projection or motion seats or whatever else is on the horizon, it's our job to make sure those things land in our theater and we don't become a dinosaur like a newspaper is in its industry.
One other time we came to see Despicable Me 3 a week ago.
Oh, yeah.
We come all the way over from Davis.
How do you like it so far?
We really love this theater. It was referred to us by my daughter and her husband who came over with friends about a week before then. She told me about the great seating, and it was most comfortable. The theater is new and clean, and we just really enjoy it. How about you, Quinn?
I love it.
Did you say you love it? Yeah, we love it.